Dalton, Illinois, is reeling from a political and financial scandal that has shocked the community and made headlines across the nation. Mayor Tiffany Henyard, once seen as a beacon of hope for the town after the sudden death of former Mayor Frank Suki, is now at the center of a growing investigation into wire fraud. Allegations have surfaced suggesting that Henyard used questionable means to fund her lavish lifestyle, all at the expense of Dalton's budget. What began as a promising leadership story has spiraled into a financial catastrophe, with the town facing crippling debt and residents demanding answers at first glance. Henyard's extravagant lifestyle seemed absurd for a small-town mayor. She was frequently spotted on luxury vacations, flaunting expensive luggage, and maintaining a costly security detail that likely cost more than many people's annual salaries. But what appeared to be a minor scandal quickly grew into something much darker, a story of financial mismanagement and alleged fraud that had spiraled out of control. Henyard's personal wealth and lavish spending habits were increasingly funded by taxpayer dollars, while Dalton's finances were left in shambles. As the FBI began to investigate Henyard's actions, it became clear that the once thriving community had gone from financial stability to a mountain of debt under her leadership. The more the FBI dug, the more disturbing the picture became. Henyard, who had promised to bring change and innovation to the town, had instead turned Dalton's finances into a mess, while living a life of luxury at the expense of the very people she was supposed to serve. The investigation was launched to uncover how a town that had once boasted millions in reserves could be facing such a dire financial crisis. The story of Henyard's rise to power begins with the sudden death of Mayor Frank Suki, which left a vacancy in the mayor's office. Henyard, then a local official, was quickly appointed to fill the role. Many locals were initially skeptical of the rapid appointment, but Henyard immediately made bold promises for Dalton's future, and her charisma garnered attention. Her talk of new ideas and excitement initially sparked hope in the community. But it didn't take long for things to take a turn for the worse once public funds were involved. Henyard's handling of the town's finances raised suspicions. What seemed like a fresh approach for a small town quickly devolved into a scandal of reckless spending and mismanagement. Henyard's actions weren't just careless, they were wasteful. Her administration grew increasingly aggressive and polarizing, with anyone who dared challenge her being silenced. Trustees who questioned her extravagant spending were fired, and those who tried to step in and investigate her financial decisions were ignored or overruled. It became clear that Henyard was treating the town's funds as if they were her own personal ATM, while Dalton's financial stability slipped into decline. Henyard continued to live a life of luxury, taking costly vacations, purchasing designer clothing, and maintaining her expensive security detail. Despite growing concerns and warnings in the community about the town's mounting debt, she persisted in her extravagant lifestyle. She seemed confident that she could outsmart any opposition. But as the FBI began to take notice of her questionable actions, the situation quickly escalated into a full-blown corruption scandal. What initially seemed like a case of unfortunate mismanagement had evolved into a serious investigation into fraud. As the FBI dug deeper, they uncovered a troubling pattern of financial mismanagement, with Henyard at the center of it all. The residents of Dalton, once hopeful about Henyard's leadership, now found themselves grappling with the fallout of her actions, which had transformed her from a celebrated political figure into the embodiment of scandal. As the investigation continued, serious questions emerged about how Henyard had mismanaged the town's funds and whether her lavish lifestyle had been funded by the very community she was supposed to serve. The more details that surfaced, the clearer it became that Henyard's leadership had been disastrous not only for Dalton's finances, but also for its trust in local government. Meanwhile, another unsettling incident occurred in a neighboring community, Dolton Township. Further fueling concerns about Henyard's leadership, the elected assessor, Ann Stone, arrived at work one day to find that her office door had been locked. Upon further investigation, she discovered that sensitive taxpayer documents, including names and addresses, that had been securely kept in her office were now scattered in a common area. The unsecured documents raised serious concerns about the transparency and security of local government, only adding to the growing sense of discomfort and distrust among residents. The breach of confidentiality was particularly concerning because the new supervisor under whom the assessor worked had close ties to Henyard. The lack of security and transparency raised further questions about the effectiveness of local leadership and whether the issues in Dolton Township were connected to the financial chaos in Dalton. It was becoming evident that Henyard's reckless spending was only one piece of a much larger puzzle that was affecting neighboring communities as well. As the investigation into Henyard's actions intensified, more questions arose about how deep the financial mismanagement ran and whether Henyard's actions would lead to criminal charges. The town's residents, once optimistic about her leadership, were now facing the harsh reality of her reckless spending. Dalton, once a financially stable community, was now grappling with a mountain of debt. crumbling infrastructure and eroding trust in its leadership, the FBI's probe expanded to include Henry's personal business ventures, such as her restaurant and property management enterprises, as well as her ties to individuals like Keith Freeman, suspected of being involved in some of the financial dealings that had raised eyebrows. The investigation spread from Henry herself to her inner circle, with federal agents examining every penny that had passed through Dalton's coffers. The scale of the investigation quickly became apparent, and the more investigators uncovered, the more it seemed that Henry had lived a life of luxury at the expense of Dalton's taxpayers or extravagant purchases, including a notorious $33,000 shopping spree on Amazon, further fueled public outrage. As the FBI continued its work, it became increasingly clear that Henry had used her position to fund a lavish lifestyle, while the town sank deeper into debt. The residents of Dolton, who had once trusted Henry, now felt betrayed and angry. They demanded accountability, but Henry, unwilling to admit fault, continued to push back against the investigation, framing it as a political attack. With the FBI's investigation gaining momentum and new details emerging about Henry's financial misconduct, it became increasingly clear that her political career was doomed. Her once promising tenure had turned into a nightmare for Dalton, and now the town was left to pick up the pieces of the financial wreckage she had caused. The future of Dalton was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the consequences of Henry's actions would be felt for years to come. Dalton's residents are now resolved to hold Henry accountable for the damage she has done, hoping that justice will ultimately be served. As the investigation continues, the town's residents remain determined to rebuild, ensuring that the lessons of the scandal will not be forgotten. The political and financial scandal surrounding Dalton Mayor Tiffany Henyard has escalated into a full-blown crisis, shaking the small town to its core. Initially, Henry's rise to office after the sudden death of her predecessor, Frank Suki, was met with cautious optimism. However, her management of the town's finances quickly became a cause for concern, spiraling into what is now a nightmare for the community. Her reckless financial practices, including lavish spending funded by taxpayer dollars, raised serious alarms as the town's financial stability deteriorated. Henry's behavior became increasingly extravagant, with rumors circulating about her indulging in designer shopping sprees, taking expensive trips, and maintaining a costly security detail that far exceeded the budget of the town's police department. As Dalton's financial situation worsened, Henry seemed confident she could continue living a life of luxury without scrutiny, even as the town's debt grew and trust in her leadership eroded. Her actions alienated key members of the town's board, who were responsible for overseeing her financial decisions. Attempts to push through payments without proper approvals led to intense friction, with the trustees repeatedly rejecting her proposals. This opposition culminated in a heated board meeting, where Henry's attempts to settle the town's general fund bills were met with complete resistance. Frustrated, Henry abruptly adjourned the meeting and stormed out, further heightening tensions within Dalton's leadership. Meanwhile, another troubling event in neighboring Thoron Township added fuel to the fire. The elected assessor, N. Stone, arrived at work to find her office door locked. Upon further investigation, she discovered boxes of confidential taxpayer information, including names and addresses, that had previously been secure in her office, now scattered in the common area. The breach of confidentiality raised immediate concerns, especially regarding whether this was a careless mistake by the new supervisor under whom Stone operated, or whether it was a deliberate act. As scrutiny around Henry's leadership grew, questions emerged about a potential connection between her controversial actions in Dalton and the growing chaos in Thoron Township. The fallout from Henry's erratic leadership had already caused a breakdown in trust within Dalton, and it was becoming clear that she had lost the support of the town's trustees. The board members were unwilling to cooperate, refusing to discuss any of her financial recommendations, leading to further deadlock and increasing hostility. As the situation became more volatile, Henry grew visibly frustrated by the lack of cooperation and the mounting opposition to her actions. Her leadership became more divisive, not only in Dalton but also in neighboring Thoron Township, where her authority was beginning to slip, and her decisions were under increasing scrutiny. The damage to Dalton's financial health and transparency became undeniable. As tensions escalated and Henry's behavior grew more erratic, it became apparent that the town was grappling with the consequences of her reckless financial management and authoritarian leadership style. As the investigation into her spending and actions deepened, it remained unclear whether Henry would be able to recover from the damage she had caused, or if her political career was doomed. Henry's extravagant lifestyle, funded by taxpayer money, continued to shock residents and investigators alike. The breach of confidentiality in Thoron Township only added to the growing concerns about her ability to lead responsibly. The increasing opposition from Dalton's trustees seemed to seal her fate, as it appeared unlikely she would be able to regain the support she once had. The situation continued to unfold, but it seemed inevitable that Henry's time in office was quickly coming to an end. The investigation into Henry's financial practices intensified after the FBI became involved. Initially, the scandal seemed to be a small-town issue, but as the FBI began examining Dalton's finances, it quickly morphed into a federal investigation. Subpoenas were issued, and the FBI began scrutinizing payroll records, budgets, credit card bills, and expense reimbursements. The deeper the investigation went, the more troubling the picture became, revealing financial mismanagement and potential fraud. With Henry at the center of the storm, the FBI expanded its inquiry to include Henry's personal business ventures, such as her restaurant and property management enterprises, and issued a second subpoena for financial records from a neighboring Thoron Township. The investigation's scope widened, now including Henry's inner circle. Individuals like Keith Freeman, who was suspected of being involved in some of the questionable financial dealings surrounding her leadership. Former FBI agents began interviewing local business owners and scrutinizing every penny that had passed through Dalton's coffers. Investigators likened the complexity of the case to that of the Watergate scandal, given its intricate nature and the web of corruption that seemed to surround Henry's administration. Meanwhile, Henry's lavish spending continued to raise eyebrows, particularly her astronomical security detail, which cost the town more than several national defense budgets combined, while Dalton's own police department remained underfunded and unable to address the town's crime issues. As if that wasn't enough, Henry's extravagant personal purchases came to light, including a notorious $33,000 shopping spree on Amazon. This spending spree shocked even seasoned investigators, further solidifying the public's perception of Henry as a leader who had no regard for the financial health of the town or its residents. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Henry had lived a life of luxury at the expense of Dalton's taxpayers, all while the town sank deeper into debt. The more the FBI uncovered, the more evident it became that Henry had abused her power and position to fund her own extravagant lifestyle. The public's outrage grew as residents realized the depth of the financial mismanagement they had been subjected to, and they began demanding accountability from the mayor. The once financially stable town of Dalton was now struggling, its future uncertain as it faced mounting debt and a crumbling infrastructure. The situation was made all the more dire as Henry's once promising leadership morphed into an embodiment of political corruption. The anger of Dalton's residents intensified as they realized their trust in Henry had been utterly betrayed. Adding fuel to the fire, the Dalton Village Board enlisted former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, now a federal prosecutor, to assist in investigating Henry's financial decisions. Lightfoot, known for her keen eye for financial mismanagement, began poring over Henry's credit card records, travel logs, and expenditure documents. The deeper Lightfoot dug, the more evident became that Henry had been living in a world of luxury, while the town she was meant to serve was collapsing under the weight of its financial woes. Despite the mounting evidence, Henry refused to go down quietly. She attempted to frame the investigation as a political attack, arguing that the scrutiny she faced was due to her race and gender, rather than her reckless behavior and financial misconduct. As the scandal continued to unfold, Henry's excuses fell flat. At a recent village council meeting, the residents made it clear they were done tolerating her reckless behavior, demanding that Henry take responsibility for her actions. As the pressure mounted, it became increasingly apparent that Henry's time in office was running out. With the FBI closing on the case and more evidence of her lavish spending and financial mismanagement surfacing, her political career seemed doomed for the residents of Dalton. It felt as if a nightmare had unfolded right before their eyes, a scandal that resembled the drama of a reality TV show, but with far greater consequences. As Henry dug herself deeper into the hole, the town was left to pick up the pieces of the financial wreckage she had caused. The future of Dalton remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. Henry's actions had permanently scarred the town's financial history now. The residents of Dalton, supported by the federal government, were resolved to hold Henry accountable for the damage she had done, hoping that justice would ultimately be served. As the investigation continues and new details emerge, the town's residents are steadfast in their demand for accountability, determined to rebuild from the wreckage Henry had left behind.
That I actually agree with.
I would trust this woman as she filled out a stack of Bibles and had her tongue notarized.
Tensions between Mayor Tiffany Henyard and the leadership of Dalton have reached a boiling point as the town's financial situation spirals further out of control. Fueled by Henry's reckless spending and poor financial decisions, Dalton now faces a severe financial crisis, with its debt ballooning to over $3 million, a staggering contrast to the millions it once had in reserves. As the crisis deepens, the FBI has stepped in, launching a federal investigation into Henry's financial dealings, and residents of Dalton are growing increasingly disillusioned with both their mayor and local authorities. The controversy surrounding Henry's extravagant lifestyle, funded by taxpayer dollars, has sparked outrage among Dalton's residents. Many are questioning the integrity of their elected officials, with accusations of corruption and misconduct running rampant. Local businessman Lawrence Gardner has claimed that he was harassed by the police after he refused to contribute to Henry's campaign, raising serious concerns about the mayor's influence over law enforcement. Gardner's accusations have only amplified fears that Henry has used the police department as a political tool to further her own agenda, further eroding the public's trust in Dalton's leadership as Dalton's infrastructure deteriorates, with crumbling streets, underfunded public services, and essential services at risk of being jeopardized. Local trustees have attempted to investigate Henry's spending in an effort to curb the financial mismanagement. However, Henry quickly shut down the inquiry, demonstrating her unwillingness to relinquish her lavish lifestyle or be held accountable for her actions. The situation has grown so dire that the state of Illinois has suspended funding to Dalton, a stark indication of how severe the town's financial problems have become. The village is now in debt by over $3 million, and the gap between the town's financial struggles and Henry's opulent lifestyle has grown too wide to ignore. Local trustees are demanding transparency from the mayor, requesting a full accounting of how the town's funds have been spent. But Henry's actions have only deepened the divide within Dalton's leadership, with her increasing instability further complicating the town's future. The situation is becoming increasingly urgent, and the collapse of Henry's political empire now looms large over the community. The FBI's investigation into Henry's spending habits has intensified, with federal authorities casting a wide net to examine her financial records, including company transactions, salary records, and reimbursements. Former FBI agents have emphasized the gravity of the inquiry, which is specifically aimed at uncovering the full extent of Henry's alleged misuse of public funds for her personal gain. The public has been shocked by Henry's lavish purchases, including luxury items such as designer handbags, expensive trips, and a staggering $33,000 shopping spree on Amazon. Especially given the town's deteriorating financial stat. As the investigation unfolds, residents of Dalton are left wondering how their town was led into such turmoil, with Henry's actions causing irreparable damage to the town's finances and eroding trust in its leadership. The fallout from Henry's lavish lifestyle and financial mismanagement continues to ripple through the community, and as the FBI deepens its probe into her activities, the future of both Henry and Dalton remains uncertain. The residents of Dalton, fed up with the mismanagement and corruption, are demanding accountability and transparency from their mayor. But whether Henry will be held accountable or whether the town will be able to recover from the damage she has caused remains unclear. The growing sense of fury among the community, coupled with the escalating federal investigation, signals that Dalton's crisis is far from over. It is uncertain how or when this scandal will come to an end. Dalton's financial crisis has reached alarming heights, with Henry at the center of a scandal that has left the town in turmoil and its residents furious. While Dalton faces crippling debt, deteriorating infrastructure, and a lack of essential services, Henry has been living an extravagant lifestyle funded by taxpayer money, sparking outrage and mistrust among the people she was meant to serve. Her lavish spending, including designer handbags, expensive trips, and a costly security detail that far exceeded the town's police department budget, has stunned the public, especially as the town's financial situation worsens. The village board, desperate to find answers, enlisted former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, now a federal prosecutor, to investigate Henry's spending. Lightfoot, known for her keen eye for financial mismanagement, began examining Henry's credit card bills, travel logs, and spending patterns, uncovering a disturbing history of misappropriated funds. Henry has tried to justify her behavior, claiming that the investigation is politically motivated and accusing her critics of targeting her because of her race and gender. However, the people of Dalton are rejecting her defense, growing increasingly irate as the scandal deepens. The FBI, which had already begun investigating Henry's financial activities, has expanded its probe to include her entire inner circle. Federal officials are examining company transactions, salary records, and cash reimbursements in an effort to determine the full extent of Henry's alleged financial misconduct. The investigation has intensified, with federal authorities seeking to uncover how much public money was squandered on Henry's personal luxuries, painting a picture of waste and corruption that has stunned the public. One of the most shocking revelations has been Henry's $33,000 Amazon shopping spree, which has further fueled public outrage. While the town's population struggles with debt of over $3 million, Henry has continued to live a life of luxury, seemingly unconcerned with the financial turmoil she has caused. As the investigation gains national attention, the people of Dalton are demanding accountability and transparency. Many are calling for Henry's immediate resignation, and the village board is under pressure to hold her accountable for her reckless spending and to restore some semblance of trust in local government. The FBI's investigation is likely to bring even more bombshell disclosures to light, and Henry's time as mayor is quickly coming to an end as the full scale of her alleged fraud and financial mismanagement becomes clear. While Henry has attempted to downplay the situation, claiming that she is being unfairly attacked, the reality is that Dalton is now left to deal with the consequences of her actions. The town, once financially stable, is now facing a future filled with uncertainty, as Henry's reign has left it deeply in debt. With infrastructure falling apart and vital services in jeopardy, the next mayor will face an uphill battle to restore order and repair the damage done by Henry's reckless behavior. It remains unclear whether Dalton can recover from the long-lasting effects of this scandal. The destruction of trust in local leadership will be one of the town's most difficult challenges, as the people of Dalton are left questioning how a once thriving community could be brought to brink of financial ruin by a leader they once trusted. Henry's fall from grace serves as a stark reminder of the importance of holding local leaders accountable, especially when their actions directly affect the well-being of the community. While national politics often dominate the headlines, it is the decisions made by local leaders that shape the future of towns and cities. And when those leaders abuse their power, the consequences can be devastating as the FBI continues its investigation and new details of Henry's spending habits emerge. Dalton's residents are resolute in their demand for justice. They are determined to hold Henry accountable for her actions and to ensure that the town's resources are used to rebuild, not squandered on unnecessary luxuries. Henry may have thought she could evade justice, but the people of Dalton are not backing down. The FBI's investigation is ongoing, and the town's residents are committed to seeing it through to the end, determined to fight for their community's future and to hold their former leader accountable for the damage she has caused as the dust settles and Henry's time in office winds down. The future of Dalton remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. The scandal that has engulfed the town will be a defining chapter in its history, and the consequences of Henry's actions will be felt for years to come.